Good.
Welcome, listeners. I'm excited. We have Sarah Kernion. She's a writer, podcast host of the Inchstones Podcast, and mother of two profoundly autistic, non-speaking children. She advocates for new conversations about profound autism focused on neurobiological barriers like apraxia, dyspraxia, and sensory processing disorder. Her mission is to call for research urgency, scientific rigor, and a civil rights reframing for profoundly autistic individuals who are often left out of mainstream neurodiversity conversations. And she's really thinking about how to redefine advocacy around presence, effort, and dignity rather than milestone achievements, and why the conversation about profound autism must be distinct, urgent, and grounded in research. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, Julie. When I hear that all, I'm like, who are you talking about? Did I do all that? Have I done all that? But yes,
Yeah,
feels good.
I
Thank you.
love it. Well, let's start out with like your own experience. What brought you into this work with your kiddos, and how did it all manifest?
I was, for all intents and purposes, on that white picket fence. Um, the dream becomes the reality of life as a young mother. And when Millie was born, and I'm still a very big fan of Emily Oster out of Chicago, who talks a lot about and wrote a book called Expecting Better. And it really reframed me and put me in the mindset of every child I have is going to be different, and to allow those developmental differences with each child um, raise your bar of motherhood, right? And not expect one child to be similar to the next. It sounds so basic, right? But at the same time, when you're 30 years old and have a toddler, and you only had a toddler that didn't touch the stove when you told her not to touch the stove, it was a reminder to me that in a book form, and a visual reminder that my child that I had, my Millie, was not to be compared to her sister. So I went into second time motherhood fiercely protective of allowing Millie to become Millie. And what I realized as Millie's development was not just slow, but started to have some very marked uh, pauses and differences, that I had this, this sneaking feeling, this intuition, this gut response of I'm letting Millie develop, but something feels radically different and radically slower than I ever anticipated. And it was when I started to dive more into conscious motherhood, conscious understanding, and listening to that primal intuition of my own to guide Millie to the best version of who she was, and is still continuing to grow to be. So it was really when Millie was around 18 months that I was sharing, and I don't think I realized it probably until recently, that that was advocacy, when I was sharing and vulnerably talking about what I didn't even know was a diagnosis, and the
Right.
confusion around it.
Yeah, and like that intuitive, like you said, gut feeling, like something's different here, like the development's different, her way of interacting with the world's different.
Yeah, it was like all those boxes of saying, okay, uh, from a human standpoint, she's fed, she's well rested, and she's loved.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Something is showing me that she's not comfortable, that she might be
Hmm.
in some sort of pain. And that was really, that was a hard space to sit in.
Yeah. Yeah, because your number one priority is to protect your child, and you're not sure how to protect them, and you're not able to communicate with them in the ways that you're used to. I can absolutely relate. My 4-year-old, who is, I wouldn't say profoundly autistic. I'm curious how you define that, but she does speak some. She kind of has her own language that we know.
Mhm.
And she is interested in hugging and touching and things like that. But I'll tell you, Sarah, like the minute she came out of my body, I just remember seeing her and just feeling completely different about her versus her older sister, who's very neurotypical. Jane came out and I was like, clean her up. She looks upset. Like, get her, Dylan comes out
Yeah.
and like, give her to me right now. I know she needs support. Like there was a different feeling around her. And that's really continued these last 4 years. But I know your work is focused on that intuition and using it as like a data point. I'm just curious. You've probably heard countless stories like that, Sarah. Do you just know
Yeah,
something?
I think that in the world of advocacy, and I love that we have and are a part of a country that allows for advocates and support to be brought in to environments for our child's education, right into the IEP room with
Yep.
these what can seem like a static fluorescent room of people who have just observed your child and want to tell you what is best for them. And in going through it myself, I was realizing that I, as Sarah, was able to communicate what I saw outside of these observations and classroom visits and to translate that in a legal sense to say, this is a data point that I've seen from before we even received a diagnosis, but what also led in and has now beautifully bled into their IEPs and in being taken seriously from that to not use it as a point of like a forced data
Yeah.
point, but to show and to say, I experienced this. Here's the recordings of it. Here's my notes here's my journal entries that I took after the day, how much of a wide variety of meltdowns were occurring at a park, at on a trail, um, at a restaurant, what those actually looked like from real factual data to
Mhm.
align with my intuition.
Yeah.
And I think that what I got to see is that I trusted that if I could articulate that in a way to help Millie, I believe mothers have that within them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
being able to speak and put the power, as you say, like I will never know what it was like to give birth to Dylan and what you said you felt.
Hmm.
I will never know, but I believe that you knew something. And I believe that that is factual data. I believe that we cannot divorce our primal intuition as women and mothers.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be a part of a greater conversation, especially as it comes to profound autism,
Yeah.
specifically because of the weight of the caregiving role.
Yeah. Well, and back up for a second. Let's define what profound
Yeah.
autism is. And then part two of the question, Sarah, is why? Yeah, we know the lion's share of caregiving falls on women, but
Right.
autism in particular, I just don't see a lot of examples of men in caregiving positions around.
Mhm.
It does feel even more heightened
Yeah.
because of the level of care and patience and empathy and all the things that are required
They're
that are
very,
wrapped into
very,
social
again,
life.
again, like evolutionary biology, like is put to the test here, right? Beautifully. It has nothing to do with men and fathers not desiring to be an integral part of the care team for their children. I fully believe
Right.
that fathers are a part of this, and they have an innate ability to or drive to protect and support or provide. And at the same time, what I think, I am seeing it more and more. I will tell you, it's been amazing to be in this space to see some dads reach out for more of support networks, beginning with dads themselves, not the mothers starting it for groups of dads. So I do believe that we are at what I think is a beautiful inflection point for fathers to lean in. That being said, it takes a lot of psychological safety for dads to share vulnerably about this. And um it's been beautiful to see, but I hope that mothers like you and I can support the dads to do that organically
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
doesn't come naturally.
Yeah. 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 I noticed it with my neurotypical 11-year-old. My husband was definitely the primary caregiver. I was started my business. I was
Yeah.
very traveling. And so he
Mhm.
really took the lead. This time around, it's been totally different. I take the lead. I'm the main point of contact with Dylan because I think people, one, naturally default to me.
Mhm.
So I feel that pressure. And then
Yeah,
you just feel like this is so much more than it was before. And not that I don't think he could handle it, but I
right.
got the sense he was really struggling with it. Like you said, that vulnerability, that um, which is interesting because we overdiagnose boys. Well, not overdiagnose, but we
Yeah,
diagnose boys at higher rates than
I
we do
read, yeah.
girls. And then the caregiving aspect is kind of, and it's
So, oh, yeah, listen,
hereditary.
it's so complex. Like I will never, it's like my favorite, like my two C words, curiosity and complexity are
Yeah.
like the words of 2025 for me because it is so complex.
Mhm.
For me, like your question was profound autism for me really is equated to, intensively high support needs, where from morning to night,
Mhm.
there is an inability to communicate or to be in control of one's body and bodily
Mhm.
functions and safety. And so, you know, realistically, my days begin with my children. I am fully helping, if not doing the work of management of their toileting and
Mhm.
dressing and
Mhm.
hydration and nourishment, start to finish. And I think that because, again, the women being, from the moment we give birth, I think we are wired to do those high support needs things. What I don't think that we are maybe uh, designed for right off the bat is like the length of which profound autism demands of that to a longer timeline. I think mothers will across the board can tell you, yeah, like a first time mom, like I didn't realize how, none of us realize, we don't know what we don't know, how much these little like puppies need us. I always say they're like these fresh newborns. You do not know what you don't know as a mother.
No.
But when the fresh newborn support needs grow and develop into more independence, if that doesn't happen, I do think that the nervous systems of mothers and what we are asked to do disproportionately falls on us. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying it's wrong. It's just that I think it's because it becomes, we're expecting that primal support need to just say, okay, well, you do it innately, just keep doing it.
Right. Right. Back to
And
that
so, and it's
exhaustion.
independence. I mean, if I don't think that if we are, as mothers, more wired to help when children are not able to be independent, it makes sense for fathers to lean in when the independence does come. And
Yeah.
so when that independence doesn't, that there's a mismatch there.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
um, I guess that's why I go back to the mother's intuition of like, okay, not only do I notice this, I'm going to need more help too.
Mhm.
I'm going to need more support. And this is counterintuitive. This feels
Right.
like I'm asking for too much, but like I know that one person cannot withstand this. And yet we as a society are basically saying, we see you and good luck.
Mhm.
That seems really hard.
Not sustainable at all. I
It,
mean,
I mean,
when
it
I
is sustainable. We're doing it, but to what degree are we frying our our functional abilities?
yeah, I just went on a few days away with my oldest and not Dylan, my autistic kiddo, and I just didn't realize how much my nervous system like quieted down because you're constantly thinking about potential threats,
Mhm.
potential meltdowns, like unknowns, unpredictability, like uncertainty just is not something autistic minds prefer. And so taking her places is just, it's just much more challenging. And I just felt like this, like, oh, I can breathe. My heart rate was down. Like I'm like
No, and we
sleeping
find
better.
right, and like I mean, again, it's not. It's so beautiful to be a mother who can have the time and to reflect on that, and yet when you do get that, you think, okay, I've survived my hardest of days. I've learned so much, but at what point am I physically able to keep this going? I never want to compare. And there's been some memes that have floated around social media about, parenting autistic children is like frontline combat, right?
Yeah.
And again, that is that I have that seems like a really, really big stretch. And at the same time, when I think about frontline combat, people getting a break, I think to
Mhm.
myself, well, we typically, unless we're able to, or unless we're able to press pause and pass over the reins, just for providing safety for, and keeping someone alive, hydrated, and fed, we don't get those 6 weeks of passive time off to regroup before going back into the front lines.
Mm-mm.
And so
No.
in those 2 days, I'm glad that you were able to carve that out and to take note of it too, because part of it is being able to speak about what you're going through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it just makes me wonder about the sustainability of all of this. 1 in 36 births,
Yeah.
and that's just autism, right? Neurodivergence, way more than
Yeah,
that. One in
dyslexia,
five.
ADHD, yeah.
Yeah. And without those caregiving compounds, the needs, doctor's appointments, the special need considerations, all those things, like you said, to help with tasks that you may not have to help
Yeah.
others with. And so, if this all falls primarily on women and we don't have a lot of support mechanisms in society, I'm thinking about the workplace and can workplaces continue to not have women actively participating in them if we're going to have all of this caregiving outside of work? And that's the part to me that I'd love for us to rethink. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Sarah,
Yeah,
but
I mean, I think about that a lot. I go into companies and speak on the beautiful positivities of neurodiversity recruitment and employee retention and people and employees being open about their own neurodiversities to not only add a competitive advantage to how their customers might see a product, but also just within the employee network. But what I'm realizing, and when I speak at these companies and their ERGs, is that there's a reason why very few women can maintain growth in their careers when a
Mhm.
diagnosis hits their child.
Yep. It like plateaus or
I mean, it
plummets.
totally plateaus, right? And I love, I don't, this isn't my wheelhouse, but I can only imagine the data points that show that. I was a stay-at-home mom when I had Millie, but let me tell you, my stay-at-home mom capacity was raised. I mean, I had to. There was no alternative, right? My motherhood did not look like a second rodeo in my second rodeo. This was like, oh, I'm not even on the planet of rodeos. Like this is I'm being thrust into like a galaxy I've never been in before. And at the same time, I can't imagine if that happened when you were in a
Hmm.
work field on a mission and a purpose that you felt so driven to be in corporate America sense. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I just think that even the practitioners and clinicians that might work with children in the population like ours, I always say I love hearing about what they think would help or how this would be uh,
Hmm.
would be supported. Come live this life for 30 days and can we talk after that? I'd love to
Yeah.
see more applicable reality consumption
Hmm.
to then offer up what their bodies might feel during this. And that's, maybe the conversation to be had is how can we get the acknowledgement of like what that load is? Because I mean,
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I applaud that your work is in this because if it's noticeable and that seismic shift of plateauing or drop off, what are we limiting then?
Yeah. What are we losing out on by
Oh,
not
I
providing
mean,
the
gosh,
support mechanisms? Like, and that's the part I don't know. I mean, I have my own business. You have your own podcast. Like we have our own things. So, like, if we were in a traditional corporate environment, I don't know. I'm not convinced I would be able to do that.
yeah,
And that's not, I'm not that I'm not willing to work hard or, do the things to climb
yeah,
the ladder, but I think it would be very, very difficult having the headspace, knowing that the caregiving, needs are so significant and travel and things like that. You just have to
yeah.
think about things so much more that I'm just wondering what we're losing
It's
out
time. I mean,
on.
it's again it's the only commodity that not a single person on this planet can purchase. And if we could, this would be a whole different conversation, right? But like I wish, I mean, I find at the end of the day, I'm the woman in her in her bed doing the New York Times crossword puzzles, and I'm like falling asleep, but I'm so excited to do my sequence. I'm so excited to do teaching. But like I can barely do that. Like I can barely carve out those 3 minutes of time for that. That time is that commodity in all of this. And at some point, you have to go. I can't give I have like you were saying before, I have to sleep. I have to. If I
Yeah.
do not sleep, I cannot even perform at a certain level of functioning that is needed.
Mhm.
And to be in the trenches of caregiving, and I share very openly, it's not to shame anyone, but when you have a 10-and-a-half-year-old still in pull-ups, that energy exhaustion looks different than a typical 10-year-old. And I'm not downplaying at all anyone's reality because we all choose how we live our lives. But for me, I don't want to stay isolated at home. I don't want to do that. I believe that the world seeing and understanding children like mine is very important. And
Mhm.
to shape, to utilize the energy I have to shape societal perception on like, oh wow, okay, oh wow, too. Like, and to just have pause taken on what that energy looks like,
Yeah.
that there's a reframing of it from the greater system can change. It's a systems, obviously, you know this. It's a systems problem. It's not a
Yeah.
maternal problem. It's a systems problem.
Yeah, it's not an individual problem. It's
No.
not a Sarah or Julie problem. That's what
No.
I'm curious about. It's because if, and just again, the focusing on workplace inclusion,
Mhm.
it's kind of my jam. But what I'm thinking about is the stories you and I are sharing, how many other caregivers are
Oh gosh.
experiencing these things and just
I see
leaving.
it. I mean, I see it. I'm in, so many different groups on as just a member, on Facebook or
Mhm.
really just online support groups through National Council on Severe Autism and what the
Mhm.
moms are going through. I mean, one thing that popped out so vibrantly to me when I first started really writing about this is the mothers that are in our age range with like younger children are not able to find the time or capacity to actually share because
Mhm.
barely have time to do the things that are necessitated to keep the train going. The older mothers of children of now adults are pining for support in a totally different way, that even the ability to get the support is so taxing. Like the
Yeah.
ignition energy on support. I always say it's like, God, it's like
When
getting
we
it
first got the
going.
diagnosis, I spent like 5 hours a week researching support, and I really didn't get anywhere, to be honest.
No, I mean, I don't know about you, but I found that it was ended up being, and this is why, again, I go back, I talk a lot about, I probably am like a broken record with my friends and family. Like, what is primal? We want to tend and befriend. Support groups, great, but like it always comes from like, hey, I know exactly the person that she's gonna call you. And
Mhm.
it wasn't that I sought someone out. It was like a friend of a friend who said, "Oh my gosh, you need to
Right.
talk to Danielle. You need to talk to Tina." It was like these very specific people, like you need to talk to so and so. And those one-on-one conversations were more supportive than I think any
Hmm.
um, online forum. It was really one-on-one and
Yeah.
how that rose. I believe that that's very primal. I think that women
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. I know people are like, oh, join a Facebook group. I'm like, first of all, I'm off Facebook. Second
Yeah.
of all, that's not how I
Listen
want
here.
to.
Listen
Right?
here.
Like,
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I like using it sometimes for like, oh, I wonder what people think about XYZ, or like a certain part of a sensory processing or an experience. But in general, is it support or is just venting, right?
yeah.
And so conversations, actual dialogue versus monologue, right?
Yeah.
And that's also a part of the maternal intuition that I hope to really remind mothers that they have, that you
Hmm.
can ask um, for the support for your child, and it doesn't have to come at this like um, like pipe, like this like steam pipe that's
Yeah,
just
I know.
right.
I know. It doesn't have to be a lot.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I'm kind of envisioning, like, if we were to kind of think about, again, the workplace, like signaling more inclusion for women as caregivers, so especially those that have neurodivergent children or profound autism, like we're talking about, like, just a forum for sharing your story, I think would be really powerful, Sarah. Like, I know you do corporate speaking, like, Some of my favorite things I've helped clients with isn't necessarily me speaking. It's getting like a panel together and I'll facilitate a fireside chat or a short
Yes.
conversation of story sharing. And when you see someone else, a colleague of yours that you work with or know of, is
Hmm.
going through this, it becomes so much more real for you.
Absolutely.
And it's that, like you said, that one-to-one kind of connection, storytelling, getting the stories out, having places where people can go for support. I think one of the things that women struggle with in general in their careers is asking for what they want, or even, like you said, spending the time thinking about what we want
We
because we're
want,
so busy taking care of everybody else.
yeah. Hmm.
But especially in this situation where your nervous system is being taxed, you're not having a lot of time for yourself, like I can't imagine going to my manager and being like, hey, I don't even know how to do, I'd have that conversation, honestly, because
Yeah.
even me in my own business, I really don't talk about my daughter's experience that much. And it's not because I don't want to. It feels like something that, not shame is a strong word, but discouraged or not professional or just like you're being too much or, you're making it about you. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious, like, how
I
can you advocate for your needs?
I I think that in any way of that we share in life, it's like honoring your own ability to look internal, right? And to say like, I always say like a Sarah at 42 does not look like Sarah at 24 did. And
Mhm.
Sarah at 30, obviously in pregnancies, all these things, we all evolve. And I think if we can speak like about, hey, I came into this role as X, this has happened, my reality has shifted, a bit. I actually, and to say I don't know what I don't know, but I just want you to know, right?
Mhm.
I was speaking at a company, and some of my prep work was talking to like the national director, and she said that they had started to implement neurodiversity kind of like self-revealing, like saying like if you have dyslexia or if you have ADHD, like please share with your coworkers what are some best practices that might help that are not like going to be an arm and a leg of support, but like in a specific situation, if you're in meetings, if you're in this, what helps you, visuals,
Mhm.
mental or something. And she said that one man said, I have a really tough time with my dyslexia, and I can get really frustrated with myself. And so I tend to then
Mhm.
get really angry that I'm not performing to the best of my
Mhm.
ability. And I know
Yeah.
that my anger might come across as like defensive or not being part of the team, but like I've noticed this pattern in me, and this is what it does. She said it opened up, like you saying, the story. He
Mhm.
shared something like that. It opened up their whole team. She's like, it was almost like a collective sigh of relief. Like
Mhm.
the next time that they
Yeah.
that he said, this is really difficult for me, they all, like the team basically was like, hey, let's give a little more grace the next few days as he works through that. And it didn't
Mhm.
affect the final product. It was just these slight sensitivities to it. And so I wonder if we can
Mhm.
just have more of a sensitivity to the acknowledgement of your life with children with special needs,
Yep.
families. Just literally from the very first part saying, just FYI,
Yeah.
this is my reality outside of work. There might be times where, my child got bit at school or bites or, like a meltdown happens or an emergency happens. And those are so volatile that
Mhm.
I'm so sorry that I can't pinpoint that, but I want you to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be so it's like the heaviest 51% of like who you are as an employee.
I
It just,
know. You don't have to unload. You can just give a
yeah,
little
you
bit.
don't unload. Just say like, yeah, like the reality is like I got two kids that, have non-speaking autism. Yeah, it's a lot. I don't need you to know much more than that, but if I come to you and say X happens, just know that I mentioned it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, and I think what we're sharing is this can become a little contagious, like your dyslexia story, like someone just sharing like, yeah, I have dyslexia and sometimes I get angry, when I get
Yeah.
frustrated that because I can't get something, I can't
Yeah.
communicate something. And then it's like, oh, huh, well, if it's safe for him to share that, maybe I can share this about me too. And it's not like a competition or comparison game. It's just like, oh, we're all human beings.
Exactly. I mean, this another thing that rises for me. I had a C-suite member. It was a father who wanted to help and facilitate this, fireside chat at his company, and the group of people, they had always known that this high up C-suite
Mhm.
member had a child with special needs. They never knew the backstory on what that was and who that child was of this person in leadership. And I just remember like, debriefing after the virtual session and saying like, guys, I think that your employees loved hearing that like 20 years ago, yeah, his wife had to handle like 99% of these things because he didn't think that anyone could handle that he had a special needs child
Yeah.
who was had to be, out of district placement and his wife was handling IPs. Like they needed to hear that.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that I think I know that you echo this. That looks like leadership too. Like
Yeah.
you say, it's not unloading. It's just saying, "Oh, I've dealt with that.
Yeah.
I had the
Yeah.
call where my wife had to go pick up my child from the school because there was a sensory meltdown and he banged his head on the
Yeah.
playground. Yeah, we need to take him to the doctor because he can't speak his pain level. Like
Yeah.
that's real.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes you real as a leader. That is
Mhm.
leadership, when you
It
share real parts
is.
of yourself.
Oh God, it really is. And I don't think that um I don't think that that has been something that we say that the best leaders through time. Like I think the best leaders have always been doing this.
Yeah.
Really do. I think that the best I talked to my grandparents before, a couple of my grandparents before they passed and asking them about like because a few of them were company owners and like they really love their people and they
Mhm.
share. So I think this is something we need to just harness that has always been a part of company culture, the very best companies at higher levels.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just now have more the global village has allowed for that to be shared, right?
Yeah. 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 It facilitates connection. It facilitates
Totally.
belonging and like wanting to do your best work. All those things are so intertwined. Like you said, those primal responses, when you feel supported and cared for, you're going to do better work.
Right. You are going to do better work. And again, those data points um, in those meetings, how you share at work, feeling like you can make a statement about your life outside of work in the
Hmm.
sense that you will be understood when things, spontaneously arise or life actually happens. And again, I think that comes down to just being open to the community at work, the psychological safety that's involved in
Right.
leadership positions, and within the community as well. I'm a very big component proponent of interacting over isolating and
Hmm.
when whatever that looks like. That's a huge part of my innate natural motherhood. But what I hope to inspire and continue to inspire within the niche that I serve, which is, caregivers and mothers of children who require 24/7 care. And the more in which we can get visibility and live
Hmm.
like everyone else gets to, we will push the needle that 1%, even if it's just within our own communities
Yep.
or employees.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your important work. Tell our listeners where they can continue to follow and get in touch with you and about the Inchstones podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. So I can be found on SaturdayStory.com, which is my parent company of the variety of divisions I've created since Saturday Story officially began a few years ago in the neurodiversity advocacy lane. Inchstones is a term I'm trademarking in the process of right now, which is the title of both my podcast as well as my Substack. And those two really allow for, as you say, the storytelling, the visibility of the women, caregivers, clinicians, um, fellow neurodiversity allies sharing their story about profound autism. So that's where I do all my work, and you can find me on the podcast, the Substack Inchstones by Saturday Story.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your important work, Sarah.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you for your time.